Hello everyone. Today my lecture is on the representation of the Muslims in the British media. My talk is based on my book Young British Muslims. The subtitle of the book is Identity, Culture, Politics and the Media. This book is based on the interviews of 216 young British Muslims, both male and female, and few social workers and Muslim leaders. So the majority of participants were young Muslims from 15 to 18 years, and they were from diverse backgrounds. So my book has 8 chapters, and one of the chapters is titled, Is the Media Biased Against Muslims? In Britain, Muslims are not a new group of people. Britain has had contact with the Muslim world since the 7th century through trade contacts with Egypt and Palestine, which had come under Muslim world. It is likely that Britain also conducted trade with Muslims residing in Andalusia, Muslim Spain, and Portugal. Later records indicate the presence of Arab Muslims in London from the 12th and the 13th century, presumably by the trade purposes. From the 16th century to the end of the 18th century, British relations with the Muslims were cordial. In the 16th century, following on from the steps began by her father, King Henry VIII, Queen Elizabeth I arranged a defense treaty with the Ottomans in 1587, and later Britain formed political links with the Muslim territories as far as India and Persia. A few centuries later, Muslims began to migrate to Britain. As this mosque shows, Muslims were present in England for a long time. From the 19th century to the 20th century, when Britain colonized many predominantly Muslim territories, some Muslims from Bengal in India, Yemen, and Somalia began to arrive in Cardiff and London. Some Yemeni and Somali people have settled in Cardiff since the 19th century. Yemeni sailors settling in Cardiff's Tiger Bay registered a house for use as a mosque as early as 1860. In Liverpool, the Muslim community was indigenous in character, led by the Muslim convert, a solicitor, Abdullah Henry William Quillam. In the 1880s, Quillam converted to Islam in Morocco while he was educated to become an alim, a Muslim scholar. In the 1890s, Quillam established the Liverpool Mosque and a Muslim institute. In the early 1940s, some South Asian Muslims purchased 3 houses in London's East End and converted them into the East London Mosque and the Islamic Cultural Center. So here in this picture we can see the renovated portion of the East London Mosque, but which was built long time ago in the 1940s. So Muslims' presence, as I said, it's not a new phenomenon in the British society. This is in Leicester. This is a mosque and its name is Masjid-e Umar. This is a participant of my study, and I took her photograph in Cardiff. She was very happy to participate in my study and was also happy to sit for a photo session. So in England, I interviewed 216 people, mostly young British, 15 to 18 years, from 5 cities: London, Leicester, Bradford, Leeds, and Cardiff. The young people I have interviewed, it was mostly to understand their identity and sense of belonging. So they have identified themselves in various ways. Some would say, I'm a British Muslim. Some would say, I'm just a British. Some would say, I'm a Bangladeshi British Muslim. So people had single identity, dual or multiple identities, but they felt very connected to the British society, and they were very fond of British sports. As this picture shows, most participants were talking about Manchester United, and at that time, Cristiano Ronaldo was a Manchester United player, and many participants of my research, they spoke highly of this sport. So my participants were felt very connected to the British society. They identified themselves with the British society, but then again, they were at times emotional when they spoke of the media stereotype, when some British media tend to stereotype with their headlines and Muslim images and reporting, and that is sometimes that impacts on their identity. They feel that they are not considered to be as a British like the Anglo British people. Muslims in Britain form 3% of the total British population, and they have places of worship, and they celebrate their Eid, as this picture shows. Muslim Eid celebration in the heart of London at Trafalgar Square. So Britain has provided diversity. There is multiculturalism where British Muslims are enjoying, and Sadiq Khan, who was a member of parliament and now the mayor of London, is also a Muslim. So there is acceptance, there is diversity, there is multiculturalism in Britain. But as I said, when the media takes side of the mainstream British against the Muslim minority, whenever there is a news that is related to Muslim, the good news is not highlighted as much, but the negative news is highlighted. And in times of crisis, all the media, the broadsheet, the tabloids, they have one voice to single out the Muslim. So the rhetoric becomes us and them. Prejudice against Muslims in Britain prevailed after the September 11, 2001 Twin Towers terrorist attacks in New York in the USA. However, after the 7th July 2005 London bombings, many Muslims in Britain were further marginalized. The 7th July 2005 London bombings, also known as the 7/7, were a series of coordinated terrorist attacks in London. 4 British Muslims carried the suicide bomb attacks on 3 London subway trains and a bus. 52 people, including one Muslim, were killed in this attack. After the 7/7 London bombing, Beeston in Leeds attracted immense media attention because 377 bombers Siddiq Khan, 30 years old, Shehzad Tanveer, 22 years old, and Hasib Hussain, 18 years old, originated from Beeston. The fourth bomber was the Jamaican born Jermaine Lindsay, 19 years old. In my study, some British Muslim respondents said that they were directly affected by the 7/7 London bombings, particularly some young Muslim males, 16 to 19 years, in Beeston in Leeds, who told me that the media haunted them after the 7/7 tragedy. Three of the 7/7 bombers lived in Beeston, so the area became a media focus. A Muslim woman of Pakistani heritage, Nadira, that's a anonymous name, pseudonym, in Leeds, said that after the 7/7 incident, the media was so hostile that the police activity in Beeston and in Leeds and around the Grand Mosque was very much heightened, and Muslims felt that they were under surveillance all the time. A British Muslim girl, 21 years old, pointed out that since the 7/7 London bombings, the media was mostly bad. It's very saddening, she said. Every time you look in the news, you see an article about the people who have blown themselves up, and obviously they have identified themselves as Muslims, practicing Muslims. For example, the 7th July bombings, and after that, a few other inquiries have taken place, and that in itself, it doesn't reflect the proper Islamic society as a whole. It is like picking the Ku Klux Klan, the group in America, the white supremacist group in America, and saying that this represents the whole of the white American population. I have done some print media research, and I have discussed my findings in my book. And this image shows that in the conservative newspaper, the Daily Telegraph, in the first page, there is the news of the headline is "The Suicide Bombers Video Won't Frighten Us," says July 7th families. So this is a conservative newspaper, and this was in the first anniversary of the 7/7 London bombing. This news of the London bombers were covered and reported by many newspapers, the broadsheet newspapers as well as the tabloid newspaper, and it was based on the video that the 7/7 bombers had released, and they threatened that they will still remain a threat to the British society. So this is a tabloid newspaper, the Daily Mirror, and the first page of this newspaper is also the news of the 7/7 bombers, and the headline is "On the day we remember the victims of 7/7, Al Qaeda releases this video of a London suicide bomber taunting Britain. We say, damn you to hell." So this is a news that is concerning for both Muslims and non-Muslims, people living in Britain, but then again, such headlines singles out the mainstream Muslims who are law-abiding and peaceful Muslims. Such headlines draws suspicions and brings the question of loyalty, whether the British Muslims are loyal to the British government. This is the image that was in another tabloid, and it's the Daily Mail newspaper, and the headline says, yesterday, those behind the 7/7 atrocity released a video of one of the bombers. Their aim on this poignant anniversary was to keep the victims of their evil act off our front page. They failed. So, among these 52 victims who were killed in the 7/7 terrorist attack, one of the victims was a Muslim, and she can be seen in this picture. So the point I want to make, that when the terrorists, they commit an act of violence, through that horrendous act, Muslims are also a victim, as this page shows, that one victim out of the 52 victims of the London bombing was a Muslim girl. So Muslims are equally affected by the terrorism committed by a minority group of Muslims. Finally, the newspaper, The Guardian, which has a reputation of being a balanced newspaper, but as I said, in times of crisis, the balanced newspaper, the moderate newspaper, the newspapers that have a reputation of being unbiased, but in times of crisis, they are aligned with all the newspapers, the broadsheet, as well as the tabloids, and they also bring out the us and debate. They also bring out the us and them debate, and therefore they can single out the minority. As this headline says, 1 year on, a London bomber issues a threat from the dead. But if this newspaper had the headline on its front page that all Britishers, both Muslims and non-Muslims, are affected by the 7/7 London bombing, and among the victims was a young Muslim girl. So, through that headline, the misunderstanding, the misconceptions against the Muslims could have been erased. But such headlines, as we see in The Guardian, it shows that the Muslims are the one who are a threat to the British society. Thank you.